I'm Carole Taylor. In this episode of Journal, we take a deep dive into the sorry saga of the Vancouver Art Gallery. What started out more than 15 years ago as a shiny new vision for an internationally recognized art gallery based in BC has turned into one of those nightmares we've seen time and time again. A budget that started out at around $300 million has now doubled to a number in the $600 millions. And that's before anything's been built. In fact, the gallery has now put the project on hold, even though an enormous hole has already been excavated in the new location. Back to the drawing board in light of these budget overruns. How did this happen? Was the idea right in the first place? Did we need a costly, splashy, international architectural firm to design it? A design that got panned from the beginning, described by one wit as a bunch of stacked mandarin orange boxes. It must be so disappointing to Michael O'Dane, who has been their huge benefactor to the tune of more than $100 million. One person who's been public about his concerns with this project from the beginning is Bob Rennie. While most people know of Bob from his stellar real estate career, his big love in life has always been the world of art. He is regarded as one of the world's top collectors of modern contemporary art. His advice and recommendations have been sought internationally by the Art Institute of Chicago, the Tate Modern Museum in London, England, and rumor has it, he will take on chair of the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. Bob also served until 2002 on the board of the Vancouver Art Gallery. So we'll be back in a moment for his assessment of the VAG's woes. Before we begin our conversation with Bob Rennie about the VAG today, let's go back 12 years to see what Bob Rennie had to say at that time.
With the Vancouver Art Gallery, that let's, instead of giving a $202 million piece of land and potential tax revenue to one institution, that if they build there, we're going to end up with another institution at the old Vancouver Art Gallery anyways. But let's look at that iconic building, going underground and having a couple satellite spaces. And I think with satellite spaces, the philanthropy is easier because you can put naming rights and you can grow at a slower pace. And let's look at spending $150 million on a Vancouver Art Gallery rather than $600 million. Because I have a concern that we have no head offices, and we're not a financial center, and governments are not handing out money the way they used to, that we have to look to the future and punch below our weight rather than constantly punching above it. And I don't want to see a failed attempt at a fundraiser of $400 million and then a black mark on Vancouver, or that, oh, they can't do it. Let's understand of stabilizing all arts and culture, opera, dance, theater, rather than just looking at one surviving at the philanthropic expense of all others. But I chair the North American Acquisition Board for the Tate in London. I spend a lot of time in museum world with curators and museum directors, and it's just tough out there, and most of these mega projects and starchitecture and one-size-fits-all museums really struggle with ongoing support. So what I'd rather do is build within our means, understand the core competencies of the collection, the same as I do with my own art collection and museum, and make sure we're sustainable.
Thank you, Bob. Boy, is that prescient. There you were, and it really was 12 years ago. And at that time, the budget they were talking about was maybe $300 million. You even then suspected it could go to $600 million.
One thing, I look at that, I'm wearing the same shirt, and I had more hair and less wrinkles, but the same glasses. I'm very conscious. Penny Ballum came to my house. They had a bit of a 4 of us presented on pros and cons about the Vancouver Art Gallery, and the next day Penny came over to the house and said, we're going to give them 2 years to figure it out. But you could just see that it was all about starchitecture and all about where more is more.
Explain the term starchitecture.
So I use the word starchitecture, that the design is more important than the function. And what we really need in an art gallery, any art gallery anywhere in the world, is we need white walls. If you go to a Museum of Modern Art in New York, you can't find the architecture, but you can sure see the white walls and the art. And I just think that we're punching way above our weight, and that's being proven out in the news the last couple of weeks.
So let's go back to the beginning and take this piece by piece so people can understand, because the community usually is the forgotten member out there, right? People are boards behind the scenes and government behind the scenes, and they're making these decisions, but we in the community don't really know what's going on. So was the idea right in the first place? And the idea was, we have to move.
No. I think there's an addiction to more, and the decision makers aren't understanding the core competency is we're supposed to raise artists' voices and show art and create discussion, and then we put all this icing on it that we think we're going to attract more people. Well, people don't necessarily come to Vancouver for starchitecture and compete with the Museum of Modern Art. We live outdoors. We spend a lot of time outside, and arts and culture has always been a tough fundraiser. We're big on healthcare, and we're big on education. But arts and culture is tough, and that's what I mentioned, is they're going to take all the philanthropy out of the community. And you know, this goes back, I was on their board in 2002, and that's when I left. And you know, a reporter asked me the other day, why do I care? And you know, I spend in Vancouver, we're known for real estate. That's our core competency here, but everyone says things are a passion. A passion has to turn into a skill set, or you don't stay with it. And I spend most of my life in art world, and I see the challenges, especially today, of running these mega structures. And nobody's talking about that. And I didn't want this to come true. I don't want a blemish on my city. But a failed attempt at this building with Herzog and de Meuron, and I'm hearing numbers between $30 and $60 million has been spent to date. And I'm seeing glib comments, well, 60 million is 10%, that's normal. But if it's going to be a $400 million building, that's 15%. I don't know where the accountability is. But I want to be careful this time, Carole. Last round from 2002 to 2015 or whatever, it looked like I was it was all personal attack with the director. And I was baited and I went for it. This is all about protecting the shortage of philanthropic dollars and our tax dollars today and doing something sensible.
So one of the reasons that some people gave for having to leave that location was they needed more storage. I do not understand why you can't build storage separately on an industrial space with perfect humidity controls, perfect temperature controls, no windows, just make it a super space.
Yeah, I've had those conversations with every museum in the world, but with the Vancouver Art Gallery, that why would we put storage on some of the most important land in Canada? I have 4,000 works in the collection. We had our museum in Chinatown. Our storage is in our warehouses in industrial areas, where shipping in and out, even to move trucks around downtown, for the challenges that go with storage. You need prep space, you need the art that's coming in for the show, and you have to be able to accept and deliver that out. But we shouldn't be wasting our money on storage. I've just, from the very beginning, and David Baxter, I spoke to him last night, knowing that I was coming on, and just reminded us of our earlier conversations, is you could sell that land for $200 million. Give it to the VEC. And then whatever residential and office towers go there, if you took 20% of the taxes in perpetuity and gave it back to arts and culture. When the Fire Hall Theatre needs money, when a dance center needs money, we have that. Because we've foregone tax dollars on that site for the last 12 years, and we've paid provincial taxes on it for the last 12 years. Where's the accounting for this?
So who makes these decisions then? Is it simply the director and the board?
That is in their job description. I have no idea how it gets this far off the rails. And I think my last round of actually being in the media and you inviting me here and letting me use my voice is on September the 15th, 2023, which I look at, that's only 12 months ago. Front page of the Vancouver Sun, $350 million is raised towards a $400 million build. And now we're 12 months later, and it's a $600 million build. And it's being sugar-coated as costs have gone up in the last 4 or 5 years. No, they didn't know the cost when they did their ground awakening. And now they're saying it's gone up 50%. And there's such complications to it, is that philanthropically, people thought it was on side, so they support it. There were 100+ social housing units on the neighboring 1 acre. They were moved off site because we're going to start construction. And now it looks like, if you read Michael Adain in the Globe and Mail on Friday, his $100 million had conditions. And those conditions haven't been met, and there's a reevaluation of that. Well, that's impactful on all philanthropy. And Michael Adain's a god. In Canada, his arts and culture philanthropy is second to none. But I don't think Michael expected a $600 million bill.
And I think he's now saying as much. We're going to continue this conversation in just a moment. Continuing our conversation with Bob Rennie about the Vancouver Art Gallery, you hit on it a little bit when you talked about starchitecture. Even if you decide you're going to have a glamorous building, why in heaven's name do we have to have an international designer? Is there such a feeling within the gallery world that we've got no good Canadian designers and architects?
Well, even in my December conversation with Michael Adain, he's a huge fan of the Pat Cows. They did his beautiful museum up at Whistler. I don't know whether Michael will ever watch this, but Michael said to me a number of years ago, "Will you shut up if we get a Canadian architect?" And I
That's
said,
blunt.
And he was referring to, I wanted a BC architect. And I said, yes. I said, I don't think there's any need to go, I was using the word starchitecture then, to go outside. Herzog and de Meuron are amazing. One of them were in town a while ago and asked to have dinner with me, and I said no. I said, I have nothing nice to say. I just don't think they belong in our city. They would belong if one human wrote a check for $600 million. If that happened, it's a different conversation. But when we're burdening philanthropy,
and taxpayers.
And taxpayer dollars today, what do we, 52 cents on every dollar goes to health care? I mean, we've got other problems that there could have been a more financially prudent way to go about this. And I'm hoping by being on here and maybe some other people that are raising some voices, I mean, this is my arrogance, but there was a comment in the Globe and Mail said, I never thought I'd ever agree with Bob Rennie. And I thought, oh, why? But it's a sensitive topic with me. I'm 68. Between now and 75, we're figuring out what to do with the art. It'll come out later in the year. We're giving us a substantial donation to the National Gallery in in Ottawa, and some of that art should stay here. But I can't support people that aren't supporting artists. I'm not going to give art that it's just supporting architecture.
Okay, so you're known as the condo king. For a day, I'm going to make you the art king. Vancouver Art Gallery king. Starting completely fresh, what would you do?
So if we've raised $350 million...
Do you think that, first of all, do you think that money will stay if that big project they donated to goes away?
I think there'll be a shift, but if they can convince people that what they're doing is better for their money, I hope a lot of it stays. But I think you have to say, how much have we raised? How much is promised? And what is the audit of those promises? And right now, it's how much more do they need, which is why they're in the soup right now. But if they have 350 million, let's take 300 million, and what could we do with it? What does a box with white walls look like on site? And then the city only needs to give them half the land because they could sell off the other half or build on it themselves. What would it look like to stay on site? The Louvre figured out with a pyramid they could go underground. We could figure out what that looks like. We have Robson Square behind us. I would have liked to see us take Nordstrom's. I wanted us to take the post office years ago, and that failed, and that would have been the perfect time. But let's go out to the community, have charrettes with, this is our budget, what could we possibly do? The trouble is, when you say you have 300 million today to spend, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to get through this process. So again, with inflation, it's going to be 400 million. Like, had we taken Michael's 100 million and the Chan family's 40 million and stayed on site, it would have been done. Had we just built a square box in 2014, we would have done that for a couple $100 million. So everything we're raising is just to cover inflation. It's not accomplishing anything more. And I just don't know how something can get this far off the rails.
Because nobody, whether it's government or whether it's the board or the director, like, there's nobody saying it's my fault or
no,
my
they're blaming it on inflation that has gone from 400 to 600. Nobody knew it was 400 a year ago. It was just an imaginary number. And John Stovall, who's come on recently and seems to be getting things to the surface, is the new chair of the board, and he's the head of the Urban Development Institute. And I just keep saying to John, punch within your weight.
What worries me is that when they say, I'm going to rethink, redesign, it's going to be another jig. Like the last time they pulled it back, then they put the cladding on the building, as if that solved all the problems. I'm sure it increased the cost.
If I can be an architectural critic, I believe Herzog and de Meuron thought, let's use wood exterior because we're all tree huggers out here, and that'll work. They'll like that. Well, that backfired. So now we've gone to a copper weave that respects our Indigenous community. Is wonderful, but it's $45 million. There's a lot of other things we could do with that money. And I think as these things come to the surface, that the community and hopefully City Hall are going to demand that we're prudent and act responsibly.
So it wasn't that long ago that Premier Horgan at that time was going down this path with the BC Museum, and it got up towards $800 million. And the community was enraged, and Premier Horgan stepped in, said, it's my fault, this is wrong, canceled, done.
He ripped the Band-Aid off and canceled it.
So I made you king, don't forget. So if you were doing it today, would you say, let's stay in the same site, go underground? How would you design it?
Well, first of all, I would stop embarrassing my city brand and pretending that this can be done. Let's stop this, and then let's see what we can do. And that, to me, is, what does a box look like on Laurel Park? What does it look like going underground? You know, it's one of the most important sites in all of Canada. It's center ice for Vancouver. When we were going to have the Olympics, the whole other story, I thought, let's take the plaza right over to the Vancouver Hotel, right over to the TD building, and right over to the Georgia Hotel, tile the streets, and then when we need a gathering place, let's put bollards up, and we have a gathering place. And that could be a fundraiser. I could charge you $25,000 to put your kid's name on a brick. But I don't see passion and community engagement, and that's what we're going to need to make it sustainable. But there should be no addiction to the outcome. It should all be exploratory right now.
So you feel that there's hope if they do it the right way?
If they were able to raise $300 or $350 million, if 250 of that is, governments have given 100, Michael was there for 100, Chan's were there for 40, can you keep the other donors on side? I think the only way you're going to keep donors on side is if you act responsibly.
But also I want to keep the focus on art, not the cost, because one of your ideas was storage offsite, but then also satellites. So rather than one huge art gallery, satellites, and I know you said it helps with fundraising, but my instinct is it helps build community support.
It builds community support. If Ian Gillespie was building a new office tower and he wanted 40 stories, we go, no, you can build 45, but you have to give us the podium for our contemporary gallery. And then somebody else doesn't, we do the same thing and we put it with Bentall's an indigenous gallery in. And then it's easy to get somebody to raise 25 or 30 million to put someone's name on it, because it's achievable and it's bite-sized. What I was accused of is wanting a scattered gallery so I could have more condos. Well, if that's how I have to earn a living, I should quit.
People don't recognize, I think, so much of your history as being involved with all of these other art galleries, but you have more than 4,000 pieces in your collection, more than 300 artists. I know of one painting that's been valued at about 26 million, so I don't think you're looking for...
Don't believe what you read.
That one I believe. Thank you, Bob, for helping us see the VAG in a new light.
Thank you for letting me use my voice where I'm really not asked to use my voice. Thank you. Thanks so much.
We'll be right back. One never wants to step on people's dreams. But on the other hand, dreams have to be supported and achievable if you are asking hardworking taxpayers to come along for the ride. In redesigning or rethinking a new Vancouver Art Gallery, I hope the result recognizes these imperatives. I'm very interested in hearing your comments on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Carole Taylor.